Welcome to the Conscious Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss the how-to of creating conscious leadership for business, life, and the world. With ordinary people doing extraordinary things and being truly in control of their own health, wealth, and happiness. Knowledge plus action with a plan creates magical results. Introducing your host, Julie Hogbin, author, international speaker, mentor, disruptor, and creator of conscious leadership, and property investor living in the UK. Welcome, listeners. We've got a second conversation with the marvel that is Kathryne Vere, intuitive healer, and so much more. And the conversation we're going to have today is around walking the talk and all that may entail. So, Kathryne, do you want to open the conversation, or shall I?
I'm very happy to. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, whatever time of day it is and wherever you are in the world. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be here with Julie today and talking on this theme of walking your talk. So let's start by thinking about, what does walking your talk mean to you? When you think about walking your talk, is it something that you actually think about a lot? Is it something that you actively do? Is it something that is important to you?
Well, I can answer that question.
Go for it.
So listeners and watchers, think about this for yourself. So is it important to me? Yes, because I believe it's vital. Do I do it? Yes. I'm going to say 99.9 recurring times I do. There's an odd slip every now and then. Depends on the culture and the environment we're in, which we were sort of talking about a little bit earlier. So there's my answers. Yes, I do it. It's vital. And B, I have a programmed walk the talk, which leads to authenticity, which leads to my integrity being intact, which leads to people knowing exactly who I am and what I am and what results and outcomes they'll get when they interact with me. So there's my answers to your questions. And what about yourself, Kathryne?
Well, I was just going to ask you if you'd be willing to break that down a bit further before we come on to me, and just say what does it mean to you? You know, obviously you're somebody that has encapsulated this formula, this structure for walking your talk, and how have you done that?
How have I done it? I've clearly identified a set of principles that I live my life by, and with hindsight, those principles are in parallel to my top values that I live my life by, or my values that are in my system, which then create my beliefs. So my top three values, and it's interesting having this conversation because I actually mentioned it on an earlier interview I did, and I was having a brief, not on this subject, but a brief conversation around values there. But my top values are honesty, trust, and learning, which is my fourth value is wealth, so creating wealth. And when I first looked at my values, when I worked out what my values were, wealth wasn't in my values at all. It wasn't even in the top 10. So I had it installed into my values, but it would not go higher than number 4. So the top 3 are honesty, trust, and learning. So they're my top 3 values. So my principles adhere themselves to those values. So I think anybody that knows me knows that I tell the truth. Know they can trust me with their secrets or any other piece of information. They know I'm not going to share it around, gossip, talk about it and share it with other people. And learning is a constant ongoing process for me because there's so much out there to learn. So all of those top 3 things are linked to the behaviours that I demonstrate out to the world, but those behaviours are linked to my belief system, which doesn't always make them easy to do because my heart still thumps when I have some of these honest conversations, but the solid sound principle that underpins my behaviours, I know that it's the right thing to do. So that's how I have identified what my walk the talk is.
Interesting.
And it's been a conscious process to do that, because I've had to unpin some unconscious, underlying, non-helpful thought processes, the script, the belief systems, whatever you want to call it, that have not always led me to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's not an easy process.
It's not an is it an easy process now? So I've been doing that for a long time, and is it an easy process once you're? So it's a skill set. So it's an awareness. Then it's a process of developing the walk, the thing that you want to walk. So the principle, in my words. And then it's looking at all of your behaviours that link to the thing, the principle, and looking at how you are living the principle or not. So there is, in some instances, a number of changes that are required within the actual behaviours that are demonstrated. So you can say one thing and completely do another. If you say one thing and you need to do it, you need to look at where you're not actually doing what you say you're doing, and then look at why you're not doing what you say you're going to do, unpick it to find out, I'm going to say the root cause, obviously knowing what you do, but look at the root cause of what's stopping you doing the thing, and then in simple terms, mend it, you change it. So that's how I see it. And sometimes you need people to give you feedback. So if you say one thing and don't do it, sometimes people have to tell you that because it's such an unconscious behaviour, you're unaware you're actually doing it. But if you're conscious of creating the principles and behaviours and you're aware enough, you can create the self-mastery. So I don't think it's that difficult. It's an awareness and a change of behaviours. And it depends how much you want to do it.
Because we live in a world where lots of people say one thing and do another.
They certainly do, in all walks of life. From leaders to managers, to the person at the petrol station, to the person on the bus, to the person walking down the street, to the person that you meet at an event or a conference, or somebody or in your family. Yes, lots of people say one thing and do another.
And I think my sense of that is where it's more aspirational than actual. You know, those situations where someone is aiming to be a certain way and they're not quite getting there. Or so they might say, for example, they might say, oh yeah, I've given up drinking, or I'm on a diet or something like that. And then 10 minutes later you see them at the bar having a drink, or, you know, eating the chips or something like that. And it's more in those situations. It's more, they're telling you more what they want to be rather than where they're actually getting. They're on a journey to somewhere. They're trying to. So the things that they've identified about the walk that they want to walk is where they're walking towards, not where they actually are.
Yes, there's a whole raft of technical word, everybody's stuff in all of that. Because I've written a chapter in a book on this. Our motivations, our motivators aren't always conscious. So motivation, and the definition I work with is a conscious or unconscious driving force that arouses and directs actions towards the achievement of a desired goal. So what motivates, we are all goal driven. Everything we do is to achieve a goal, consciously or unconsciously. So when you look at your motivators, we may say one thing and do another because the goal that we are driven towards, I'm actually really thinking about this now, the goal we are driven towards may be an unconscious driver. So I've done this, so I have gone home and I have, in my head, I've said I'm going to write a report, or I'm going to create an article or a link, or do another chapter of the book, or whatever it is I'm going to do. And in reality, what I go home and do, and I've done it in the past, I don't do it as much now, But I would go home, open a bottle of wine, sit in front of the telly and drink the bottle of wine. And then I'd go to bed and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd go, oh, I haven't done my article, or whatever it was that I was supposed to be doing. Now, again, that's me not walking my talk because I've said I'm going to do this, but my inner driver, my inner being, my inner whatever doesn't want me to do that thing consciously or unconsciously for whatever reason. So we have to be very aware of, if we say one thing and don't do it, to actually really look at what's stopping us doing it and really bottom it out as to what is the issue. So for me, when I was, I kept saying, probably 4 years, I kept saying I'm going to write a book, and I never did it. When I sat down to write the book, I wrote it within 2 weeks.
Wow.
But up until that 2 weeks, whatever was keeping me not writing the book was completely unconscious. I didn't know what it was. Now, with hindsight, it was fear of being out there. It was the fear of stepping up and out of my comfort zone, because I don't write a book. How can I write a book? What authority have I got to write a book? When in reality, there was a lot of knowledge went into the book and various things since. But it was probably 4 years before I actually sat down to write it. So all those excuses, all that nonsense, because I was writing a book for about 4 years. It took me 2 weeks to do it.
Amazing.
So there's a deep inner, I'm going to say unconscious level of what was my goal to not write the book. And when push comes to shove and I had an absolute deadline, because that's what I ended up forcing myself to do, I gave myself a deadline so I could launch it in Canada with Bob Proctor on stage and John DeMartini. That deadline, because I wanted that more than not writing the book,
Right.
which created the ultimate inner motivation, because motivation is an inner thing, it's not an outer thing. I created the environment, I created the space where I just sat and wrote the book for 2 weeks, because I wanted the other thing that was bigger than not writing the book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fabulous.
Don't know where that come from then, but that's the truth. That's the truth.
Yeah.
So we say things. Oh, I've now got cramp, listeners. Excuse me a minute. We say the things, but actually, what is it really deep down inside that's stopping us doing the thing we say we're going to do?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a whole raft of things, and there's the side of it where you're trying to walk your talk. If you know what your talk is. So I mean, it's another question for your listeners here is what is this talk that you want to walk, and what parts of your life are you walking your talk in? Once you know what your talk is, do you walk it into the office? So with you, it would be, do you take your values and principles of honesty and authenticity into the office? Do you take it home with your partner, with your kids, with your family? Do you take it out into the world when you're in the supermarket, or does your talk kind of slip and you find you allow a different side of you to come out in those situations? So I think that's a really important question to ask yourself. And then the other side of it, I guess, for me would be there's walking your talk, which is being in alignment with your beliefs, and it is a walk. I mean, I believe that life is a journey, and this isn't about judgment. This isn't about today I managed to walk my talk and yesterday I didn't. It's like, and if there's a slip up, you pick yourself up. How do you pick yourself up and keep going? Because we're on a journey here. We don't have to get it all right in one go. So it's not really. It's just about observing. It's an observation of ourselves, and it's very useful to have a daily practice where we observe ourselves, when we stop and see if we are actually walking this talk that is important to us as we go through life. And I think the other side to it is well, so to go back to that, it's like, so, back to Socrates and what's on the Temple of Delphi in Greece, which is know thyself. Know thyself. Know thyself. So in order to be yourself, you've got to know yourself. So how do you know this self that you are wanting to walk into the world? And are you actively choosing this self? Or are you the self that has been conditioned by your parents, by your culture, by who you think you need to be at work? Are you contorting and distorting yourself? Or you don't even know who yourself is? So then it's about being on the path of, you start with a path of self-observation. Now, this is something I think I've discussed with you before. I've been doing for around 40 years now, which is every day looking at the day, making time in the day to observe what happened in the day, how I was, what my behavior was, what happened to me, how I responded to it, whether I was able to respond or whether I just reacted to it. If there was an emotional reaction or trigger to that, to the things that happened. And where there was, it's like, what can I learn from that? Because for me, my learning has all been about experiential learning, about the things that happened to me. How can I draw the juice from them? How can I really make that into something powerful for me to move forward? Because my understanding is that we have this personal learning blueprint, and life is set up so beautifully for us to learn with the particular obstacles that are there. And if we engage with them, and that means engaging with them on the level of our feelings, on the level of our thoughts about them, and noticing whether we're just reacting to them emotion, we're afraid of them, or whether we're able to move towards them and towards that experience so that we can actually draw out the learning. And move forward and incorporate that learning. So the other side to this for me is to talk your walk. Now, what I mean by that is, so once you're it's all well and good to walk your talk, but if you think about talking your walk, that is much more reflective practice on the actual moment, on the present moment. Because if I'm going to talk to you about talking my walk, I'm going to talk to you about what I'm actually doing now. I've got to break it down to be able to tell you. It's not something that I've decided in advance with my principles that I'm walking. In order to break down the walk that I'm actually walking, then that means I'm going to say to you, right, so this is how I operate today, this is how I operate yesterday, and I've got to break it down in order to teach what is actually happening, not what I think is happening, what I hope to happen, or what I'm intending to happen, but what is actually happening.
So you're talking about analysing your behaviours in the moment, or as soon after the moment as you can.
Yeah.
Okay. How often, just thinking about this busy world that we live in, and everybody's always rushed and under pressure, especially if they're working, if they've got a job or they're in a business, unless they've managed that whole part of life so they get time for self. How do you think people can create the time, the space, the level of awareness to be aware of how they are operating?
Well, I think it's got to be something that you want to do, hasn't it? I mean, you can't, if you're just surviving, if you're just going around the hamster wheel, you're just kind of getting through the day, which so many people are, and understandably so. There's no judgment about this. Understandably so. The pressures of having to earn an income, looking after, having to pay bills, maybe looking after a family, parents and children, often us with the sandwich generation, we have to do both. Then you're just getting through the day. Then you're not probably going to be in the right space to be able to think about these things. I think it's really when your life doesn't work anymore. For a lot of people, that's when they start to wake up and look at some of these issues, like how am I being, or if they're repeating patterns. For example, how many people do you know who go into one relationship and they talk about it, and then they come out of it, and then they manage to go into another relationship with exactly the same set of issues with that person that they had in the one before, because they haven't actually stopped to reflect on their part, and they will blame the other person, the other partner, for all the problems, rather than look at the part that they played in bringing that relationship in, maintaining it, and not dealing with it. So I think there's a whole backlog of stuff that we haven't dealt with.
So how do people in the busy world that we live in create that awareness? Because we do have the backlog. We have the backlog from the day we were born and probably before. Mm-hmm. So how do we create a world of increased, improved awareness for individuals who are ready to look at what's going on for themselves? How can we increase that level of self-awareness?
Well, only the biggest questions on here, Julie, only the biggest questions, but that's fine.
Yeah, we're out to change the world.
Absolutely. And I think this is it. If you have this calling within you to leave this world a better place than it was when you arrived, if you have the calling within you to evolve, to find your authenticity, to become who you were intended to become, that is something, that there are so many pathways that you can do that now. But if you haven't got that, I think it's more likely that, you're going to have events and things, feeling things are conspiring against you. They're only conspiring against you because this is the time to wake up. So either we wake up consciously and make a decision to wake up and wake up every day as a woken up person. Otherwise, life is just going to carry on doing things to wake you up. So I think either which way, everybody will get it. Everybody gets it in the end. Now, what they do with it, and whether they choose to wake up or they choose to bury themselves deeper in the mire, is obviously, a conscious or an unconscious choice. But I think, waking up is now on the order of the day. We cannot avoid certain things like what's happening to the planet around us, and our responsibility within that. We cannot go on blaming everybody else and thinking it's somebody else's responsibility.
No, that's very true.
Yeah,
very
the buck stops with us. This is wake up time.
Yeah. Just for the listeners, I'm going to ask you a question. And this is going to go onto YouTube as well. So for you YouTube viewers and Conscious Leadership podcast listeners, do you wake up in the morning and are you awake? Or do you wake up in the morning and, I don't know what the right word is, survive? Do you actually feel like you're on a hamster wheel, or are you off creating your own path and your own journey? So what I do love with these conversations with Kathryne is that they trigger different thoughts, which is why Kathryne's on for a second time. But, when you wake up in the morning, are you awake? Are you looking to lead a better life for you, your family, your loved ones, your business, your colleagues, the world, the planet? Are you awake? Or are you operating in that zone of awake, but not really? So just a thought that has come to me from what Kathryne's just said, because I think, again, I can share. I don't mind sharing. I think I lived for many years thinking I was awake and thinking I was doing the good stuff and the right stuff, and I thought I had what I needed, and then I actually truly woke up. Probably woke up maybe in 2011, 2012. I was in my 50s, very early 50s at that point. But at least I woke up. And things changed from that point on. And I thought I was awake before that, but I wasn't. I truly wasn't. And I've just done an interview earlier this morning with a guy it's the previous podcast episode, who, as a man, woke up at about the age of 44, 45-ish. And he shared that. So please listen to that episode as well, because that's really interesting from a male perspective of waking up, changing your life, taking control, taking true personal responsibility for self and for the results that we all put out into the world. So that was a bit deep and meaningful at that point. So
it's fine. So yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing, because I would say that I was born awake.
See, you're lucky.
I don't know.
Maybe not lucky in this world of unwoken up people.
I don't know, because, as a child, I was able to see all the feelings, all the patterns that people, the grown-ups, weren't willing to honour and accept that they were actually feeling. In fact, I was put down for that. I was told I was wrong. That's not how people were feeling. And I could see what people's motivations were and what their agendas were, and where they were not in alignment with what they were saying and doing. And for me, that was quite painful, because being awake, when you see those things being awake, you might wake up later in life and then start to see them. But if you've always seen them and then you're told you're wrong, then that created a sort of an unease within me, where I was like, so maybe I'm wrong. So if I'm not able to trust my own inner guidance that's telling me these things, my inner guidance must be wrong. And therefore I had to shut down to survive being in the world with so much information coming in, and then having that denied or contorted, or not being honoured.
So how have you stayed awake? How did you reawaken it?
It was always awake. So I always stayed awake within myself, because I never stopped seeing these things, but I stopped sharing them. I stopped saying, and I stopped telling people what I was thinking and what I was picking up. Well, I'd say like picking up, like a radar. I was able to pick up all these things around me. So I stopped sharing them. I kept them within myself, and it culminated in a very long kind of contemplative inner journey that where I really thought, I can't share these things. So I had to kind of protect myself and shut that off from the world, because it was like, felt to me like the world wasn't ready to receive that, because I wasn't able to perhaps say it in the right way, and people weren't ready to receive the things that they don't. Nobody really wanted to be shown the stuff that they didn't want to see. This was all the dark, unconscious stuff that they wanted to be seen in the way that they were presenting themselves, not in the way that the bits that they weren't presenting. So for people like me, and I guess, terminology like empath and things like that come to mind, intuition. If you people like me who have all of that in this world, and there are a significant number of us, it's very, very painful. Because people around you're picking up things that other people, like vibrational things that other people do not pick up. So they don't exist for other people. So you sort of exist in a different world to the world that other people live in. And so you feel very different. It makes you feel very much like, there's no sense of belonging within that world.
How did you find your voice again? Because you now share your very special, I'm going to say skill set, but it's far more than that, isn't it? You now share what you do, and you work with others. I mean, I've said before that I've worked with you, so I know what you can do, partly. But how did you? So if you lost your voice on for whatever reasons, and you didn't talk about what you do, where did you find it again? Because you now do share what you do.
Yeah.
So how long did you take? Because I'm sure some of the listeners will be saying, I've lost my voice, or I used to be able to do that, or actually I can do that, but I'm not sharing it because people don't get me or don't understand me, or they tell me I'm mad or daft or away with the fairies, or whatever the phraseology is that people use about people with a different skill set. How did you find your voice again?
Well, I'm going to go back 40 years now, and because it sort of all started when I was very young, there were two things that really struck me, and really with the world, which was that I had to find the answers within myself. So I'm just going to read to you two quotes. There was one from Henry Stanley Haskins, which was, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are small matters compared to what lies within us. And when we bring what is within us out into the world, miracles happen." Now, I didn't know that last bit. I just knew the bit about what lies behind us and what lies before us are small matters compared to what lies within us. I knew that, and I knew that I needed to do the work inside myself and within myself, and that's where the whole kind of self-awareness came from. And there was also did an awful lot of reading in my teens, and another thing was with Carl Jung, who said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes."
Yeah,
which is back to the waking up business, which was that I knew that because my inner life was so vibrant, it was so excruciatingly present. I couldn't do anything but be in the present moment because all my feelings were so strong, and all my sensations, everything I was picking up was so strong. So it started there, and it was a strong, very much an inner journey, and it became a daily practice. So although I've been doing this inner work actively and consciously for 40 years on a daily basis of learning, growing, looking, experiencing, coming into my body and working with my feelings, and in that time I've come to understand the pathways into the body. I've come to understand the pathways into healing. I've come to understand how to teach people how they can access that wisdom and that power within themselves in order to heal themselves. So, I mean, there's some extraordinary things I've learned, but it's what I want to say is it's a very long, slow inner journey. It's only the last 10 years out of 40 that I've been able to able and willing to bring this out. To start to bring this out into the world. Before then, it was very much just a huge journey of learning, of inner learning, growing, a foundational journey. And I sometimes talk to people about it in terms of the 4 elements. That it starts off, that I understand that people start off up in their heads. Very much, it's all about thought. It's all about trying to work things out. It's all about, what's right. And that's the element of air. And then it's about, the process. Then if you're going to move, people are pretty scared at that point. And you've shared with me that you're a bit scared to kind of move on from that because that's the familiar.
Petrified, listeners, petrified.
The brain knows what it knows, right? And then there's this whole bit that isn't known, which is the 95% of the unconsciousness that isn't known. So we have to take the big leap of faith in terms of then saying, so if that's the 5%, let's find out about the 95% that we don't know about. And then that is about coming into the body, and the body is largely water, right? Largely water we're made up of. And the emotions are all about flow and water. So it's all these emotions that we have in our body that perhaps we haven't attended to, or in our childhood we've been told not to feel. We've shut them down with drinking, with watching films, with distracting ourselves, with procrastinating, anything not to feel our feelings because we've been terrified of feeling them. When, of course, the one thing you really need to do with feelings is feel them. And once you feel them fully, they can move and they can flow. And that is where the water comes in, that we can flow into our bodies. We can start to become embodied people. Because, in the 17th century, that's where that split came in. Before then, we were embodied beings. But in the 17th century, when it came in, that there was this schism that happened between the head that was like the computer, the brain is like the computer, and the body is like a machine, then the whole of that sense of humanity, the whole sense of us being a mind, a body, and a spirit was completely torn asunder. And it's really now, I think, the waking up is the waking up back into who we truly are, into a very, very deep, grounded authenticity of ourselves, not just as a brain trying to do things and walk, talk a walk and walk a talk, but actually how to be a beingness in this world that's awake in the body, that has an access to knowing what our feelings are, knowing what our deeper motivations are, and our longing to reconnect in much deeper ways.
This is really interesting. So I believe in generational thinking, and I do, and I believe it's passed down, and there's obviously a lot more to that, but that's one of my core beliefs. And if in the 17th century we had this division of mind, body and soul, or mind, body, spirit, we're now in the 21st century. That's like 4 centuries ago. That's a lot of generational thinking, clearing to be done to bring us back into who we are and who we can be. And one of the things, just going back to your quotes, quotes you mentioned, when you were talking about that, one of the things that came to my mind was the poem by Marianne Williamson that Nelson Mandela made. A certain part of it famous by saying, it's not our darkness that frightens us, it's our light. So it's the light within us that frightens us, not the darkness. So thinking about waking up and waking up the light to create wonders rather than the darkness. If we've got 4 centuries, I'm sort of going, blimey, this is a job. If we've got 4 centuries of generational thinking to get over, to get through, to unthink, unlive our life by, that seems to me like a big job. So how can we help, support, enable people to unleash the light, unlock the light, reconnect mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit? How can we support people to do that? Because I know there will be a lot of people listening to this that are going, I agree with you, totally get it. How do I do it? And there'll be some people going, what on earth is this interview, this conversation about? You're talking a load of woo-woo. So there's spectrums, everybody. We're all on a spectrum. Some are one end, some are the other, some are in the middle and all the rest of it. For those that really want to get involved in this change, the new way of being, the new energies, the new changes, the new way of being, how can we help them do that? How can we, I say help, I don't like the word help. How can we support them to unlock, unleash, reveal the light, to get away from the fears and the ingrained, whatever it is that's ingrained in us? Because obviously we're all different.
Well, I think we have to.
That's a big question.
That's a big question, but I think we have to start with authenticity, with who we are, and and realize that it isn't about separating out the fears and the bits we don't want and trying to hide them under the carpet and run away from them and blame other people for them, project them onto other people. Well, this is a time when I perceive us as the clean-up generation, and that's the sense that yes, the environment out there needs to be cleaned up, and the people that feel strongly that that's what they need to be doing, that's fantastic, because it needs to be done. But there's also another job that is not yet been out, shouted from the rooftops yet, and that is the inner cleanup. that we need to do.
Yeah.
And, this is the generation that needs, in the part of the waking up, is the cleaning of the inner the inner person, which is the trauma that I'm carrying, the shock that I'm carrying, the conditioning that I'm carrying, that I have inherited through these generations. And all this disconnect between the mind, the body and the spirit and the soul, all these bits that, feel separated out, we feel disconnected.
Yeah.
And we're in so much pain because we don't realise that. So the first thing I would say is just for people to know that it is possible to be integrated. It is possible. And it is a real phenomenal aspiration to start with, to know that you can come back into your body. You can live in your body, and your body has so much information within it. And when you know that the wisdom is in your body, that is so deeply empowering, Julie, because then you don't have to go and ask somebody else what the answer is to your question. You don't have to go to external authorities, because part of that cutting off in the 17th century was like, so the church has all the information and now science has all the information, or the doctor has all the information. We're now in a period of time where we can access that information, and it's nothing new. This is ancient stuff. This is what I believe we were intended to be. We're intended to be integrated. It feels like it's new because we've gone so far away from being whole, and healing is about coming into wholeness. And the way to come into wholeness, the first thing is to realize that we are separated out. Our different parts are acting separately. Our conscious part is here. Our hearts closed down here because we've been hurt. So most people close their hearts down. Their pain body is crying out. People's bodies are screaming out in pain, don't want to feel it. So we'll take painkillers, or we'll just ignore the body, or we'll tell the body, what it's got to be or not got to be. And we're not willing to, because we don't understand about the body. Nobody's teaching us that actually the body, it's safe. It's got to be safe to come back into the body and to start to listen to the wisdom. And I'll give you an example of this. So I was running a workshop a few years ago, and we were working on getting from the head into the heart. And there was one lady in the workshop, and she hadn't said anything all day. I hadn't even heard her voice. And some point in the afternoon, she suddenly, out of nowhere, she said, "Do you know, I'm really worried." And it was such a strong voice that most of us, we just sort of slightly, step back. And she said, "I'm really worried because my son is at school, and his teachers are telling him he's too much, and he's too mouthy, and she said, I'm really worried that this is going to affect him for life, this attitude of the teachers." Right? Now, she was surrounded by women who all reached out to her and went, "Oh, there, he'll be all right, he'll be all right." And as they were doing that and patting her arm, she was recoiling, going further and further back into herself, because we do that. We try and do this sort of reassuring of people. And what we don't realise is it has the reverse effect. Yep. So
you're invading their own personal space.
I said to them, just let's just sit back for a moment. And I said, right, now I just want you to put your hand on your heart and close your eyes, and I want you to ask your heart this question: these teachers saying this thing to my son, will it affect him for life or not? So she closed her eyes, she started breathing, she went into her heart, and then out of nowhere came this voice, "No!" And
Her son is stronger than the teachers.
It was so powerful. And she smiled. And do you know what? That is her personal wisdom coming through.
Yeah.
She's never going to worry about that again.
Yeah, no,
because it's come good from the deepest part of herself. Now, our hearts hold that wisdom about everything. Now, people may not know that, Julie, but that's the truth. They may not know how to access that wisdom. But your personal wisdom is in your heart. It's not in my head. So
It's not in my head either.
the best thing I can do for you is to facilitate you to find that wisdom, because I understand the pathways into your heart. I can show you how you can access that wisdom that is yours.
Yeah, it's. I think this is such an interesting subject. And I say subject is more than that, but it's the word that sort of sits with me at the minute. Such an interesting subject because you come through the education system. I didn't even know I was going to say this, but you come through the education system and it's all about what goes into the head. You go to work and it's all about what's in the head. You analyse the processes of some form of job or business, whatever it is you're running, and it's in the head. We don't very often, I can only speak from my experience, we don't very often go with the heart and the feeling and the gut. And even when I may have the gut feeling, because I think I am quite intuitive, but I'll always then analyse it and see if I match or if there's a discord or a connection. And I think and I know that's my personal choice, and I know there are people that are much more feeling than I am. And if you're in the working environment, quite often feelings are just not taken into account because it's all too emotional. People who feel and express their feelings are often considered within a working environment, I'm going to say maybe a bit erratic or something along those lines, or more difficult to manage. It's very interesting. There's a massive switch and a massive change required from leaders in business, managers in business, whether it's corporate or private or non-profit or us running our own businesses. There's a massive, I say massive because it feels big to me. I'm not sure. How big does it feel to you, this change that's required? How big do you feel the change is?
To do what?
To come back into our body, to operate from the heart or operate with the heart as a focus.
I'm sure that's something that's different for everybody because everybody is everybody is unique. But what I can tell you is that in order to be authentic, you have to really engage your whole self, and by your whole self, that means your presence. That means your an awareness of your deeper feelings. If you're not expressing them, you're in touch with them. Not only in touch with your feelings, you're also, because that's what gives you empathy as well. If you're not in touch with, how can you be empathic with somebody else if you don't know your own feelings and how they operate and the importance of them? Any part of ourselves that we've cut off will be either working against us in our energy field, or will be projected out into the world. We'll be looking at it in someone else and saying, why are they like this? Why are they like that? Because actually, really, that's just a part of us that needs to come back in. But if we're doing a daily practice where we look at that part of ourselves and we say, how can I bring that part back in? How can I own that part of myself? And you're owning more and more and more of yourself. You're owning this whole part of your inner world. And it's like there's this whole teeming world of our inner body, our inner bodiness. So we could work, we can work on the body, so we can take medication, and we can take supplements.
Supplements, maybe.
Supplements.
No.
We can do, therapies and have healing modalities that work on the body. But then there's two other aspects, which is, then we can work in the body, which is much more the work that I do, which is like how can you become a grounded person within yourself, which is where your integrity becomes not just a word, it becomes or a way of life. It becomes literally part of who you are. It comes out of every pore. Because, once you've done that for yourself, it's so easy to discern the people around you, how in touch they are with their integrity or not. Because you become a person of integrity. You become, it's your absolute beingness. It's not just your doing this, walking your talk. It is, you are You are this beingness in the world. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions. There's this misconception that, as you said about emotions, that means you're emotional. Where I've come to understand that emotions are like one of the most misunderstood things is emotional energy. We don't talk about it as energy. We talk about it as emotions. Where actually it's emotional energy. And
we talk about emotional intelligence.
But we don't talk about emotional energy, because emotions come from an energy. They are a vibrational energy. Now, if no one's taught us how to deal with that emotional energy, which generally we're not taught how to deal with that emotional energy, then it, like a fire hose, it just comes out anywhere, over anybody, you know,
completely
in
undirected.
anger, undirected, all this terrible waste of emotional energy comes out everywhere. Now that
infects other people.
Affects other people,
Infects and
drains
affects.
other people, affects other people, changes the world. Now, do you want to be a fire hose?
No.
In the world?
No.
Do you want to be, you know, infecting, affecting, poisoning other people with all this unprocessed stuff that you haven't dealt with? Because this is, again, a choice. If you don't deal with it, that's what you're doing. If you're walking into work in this mood of helplessness, in this depression, are you aware that you are actually bringing down the whole atmosphere? You are actually affecting everybody. We all have our own unique responsibility with that, Julie. You know, how are we affecting everybody else? Now, in order to, you know, say, why do it? Well, if you don't do it, that's going to be the consequence of it. Now, if you do decide to consciously take responsibility and start to understand this stuff, where the emotions are actually emotional energy, now you can do something with it, because emotional energy is just energy. Therefore, it can be transformed, and it can be transformed in one moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
In one moment. And we've done some of this together, where instead of resisting the emotion that you want to feel, whether it's fear, whether it's anxiety, whether it's anger, if you take one moment, and in that moment you take a breath, simple as this, 10 seconds, you take one breath, and you're willing to experience that feeling 100%. In that one breath, it might take 3 breaths, but you get the idea. And you say, right, I am going to breathe in this stress, and you breathe it in as an energy. It will transform through your body. It's some of this stuff is so simple. It's just a willingness to try it out and say, I'm really interested. I don't want to live in this stress. I don't want to live in this frustration, in this depression. I'm aware I'm affecting other people. Once you become aware that you're affecting other people, how do I not affect other people? And that first step is to take responsibility and learn some really simple techniques and tools that you can use, so you can start to take responsibility for your inner space and how that is affecting everybody else, because your emotional energy is a phenomenal resource. If it's caught up in clutter, if it's caught up in all these negative thoughts about yourself and about the world and everything else, right? Then that is energy that you can bring back in and you can repurpose for a positive contribution to the world. How can I make my own personal energies a positive contribution to the world?
Okay, so I'm very conscious of the time, because our last conversation was an hour and a half. I'm very conscious of the time. If some of the listeners or viewers want to get in touch with you, want to work with you about how they can
wake up,
but I think for me it's even more important. So yes, there's a waking up process, but the other thing, as in the last part of what we've been talking about, is around how do we manage, control, whatever the right word is, our energies, because we spray them out around the wherever we are. We just spray them out without much thought on occasions. I've done it in the past. I got given some feedback. I changed what I did, created an awareness in me, that feedback. How would people, if they wanted to work with you, And even at that, I'm going to say basic level, because it is quite a basic level, like managing your emotional spray. How do they get hold of you?
Oh, right. Well, they can find me. I've got a website which is called shiningonline.com.
Okay.
Or they can write to me at Kathryne@shiningonline.com, and my Kathryne is spelt Kathryn, Kathryne, Kathryn at shiningonline, one word, shiningonline.com, Kathryne@shiningonline.com. And we can have a conversation, and just to give them a chance to explore what they could change, where they need to start, where they'd like to go, how they'd like their energy to be, and what contribution they'd ultimately like to leave in this world as their legacy.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kathryne, for our second conversation on this topic, because I absolutely love it. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you to the YouTube watchers. I know you've seen side of my head most of the time, but hey ho, Kathryne's more attractive than I am. On that note, go out there, do one action, do one thing that gets you closer to where you want to be. And if it is around energy management, looking at what your energies are, looking at your legacy, looking at if it's your inner voice, outer voice, contact myself or Kathryne. We're similar and very different, but we can. I'm sure either or of us can help you, and if one of us can't, then the other one can, and vice versa. So if you want to contact us, please do. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you, Kathryne.
Thank you, Julie.
Much appreciated.
Thank you, listeners.
Yeah, thank you, listeners, and we will talk to you again soon. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Leadership Podcast. You can contact Julie on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and hear me out. Please subscribe to her YouTube channel for how-to videos and more content. And please message Julie to have your questions answered. Until next time, remember, knowledge plus action with a plan creates magical results. See it, say it, write it, believe it, and achieve it.